It's the final weekend before the final weekend of Penn State spring football, which means Saturday kicks off the last week of spring football and the last week of spring football recruiting. Pretty good list, I'd say. That's kind of my vibe from what we got coming up today on the BWI Live Recruiting Show. Of course, I run that thought by Ryan Snyder and Jon Mitchell. That's what we're going to do today, is find out if I'm right about that with the players we're going to be talking about and the conversations that we've had over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com with the important people that you need to know: players, coaches, support staff, people around those players that are going to decide the class of 2026. All that on the show today, plus much more fun and excitement from our esteemed writers, Ryan Snyder and Jon Mitchell. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Ryan, you've been busy talking to a lot of different people. What's your overall impression of the success of Penn State over the last couple of weeks, position they're in heading into everything I just laid out here in the last 90 seconds?
Yeah, 3 commitments now, and I think they've set themselves up pretty well with a few others. Most of those guys will take their official visits as expected. Of course, we'll watch Alex Haskell here in the next couple of weeks. He just took that Michigan visit this past weekend and is expected to make a decision here at some point this spring. I think it'll probably go into May from last time I had spoken with him, but we'll see. His recruitment's coming to an end, and you know, the guys they've hosted here in the last couple of weeks, it's set them up well for OV season. So I wouldn't be shocked if we saw another commitment or two, at least before OVs get going. Maybe it was a 2027 surprise or two. You can never count that out. But so far, so good. Another dozen or so guys coming on the campus today and tomorrow. Scholarship guys, I should say.
We'll get into those in just 1 second. I was just telling Fitz this before the show. It is a joke, but it's also very much a true thing. I don't get out a whole lot, so I didn't realize this was Easter week until Fitz put up the BWI Live Friday chat today, because tomorrow's Good Friday. So that's another thing we got going on this week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Fitz, how you doing? Got any fun plans for this weekend?
No, it's good. I mean, it's only natural the transfer portal will be around during Easter week. I mean, that's the original transfer portal, I guess. So we've got big plans. It's a nice little long weekend and get to see some family. So looking forward to that. But I'm just fascinated right now. Greg Pickle posted the college football rule changes, and nothing gets folks going like college football rule changes. So I'm pretty in the mud in that right now. So it's fascinating, man. We got injury rule changes. We got rule changes to protect the long snapper, which been barking up that tree for a long time. So I'm really, really glad that you could see that happening. So it's some fun stuff over here.
Yeah. Do you have any that you've read quickly? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but anything that you've noticed right away that you think is interesting?
I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. Step on the spot. No, well, the injury one, the fake injury one is the big one that's going to come out of this. And it's the one that's going to grab headlines because you are talking about guys that go down after the ball is spotted. And now that's the sort of the line here is when the ball is spotted, if somebody goes down after that, you get charged a timeout. It's not perfect. I think it's, they're going to have stuff to work through, but it's a step forward. That I don't want to call it a huge problem, but it is, certainly something that can be addressed. We've talked about taking guys off for the rest of the drive. Something like that makes sense to me, but I guess this is the next step. So the fake injuries thing, the Iowa thing, that's probably the one that's going to grab the headlines. Of course, the one that matters the most is, you can only say the call is upheld or overturned in replays. Now, the confirmed and stands will not be used again. So that's obviously, the biggest deal. So yeah, we love language here.
Yay, replay rules.
Take a closer look at some of these and see if anything is good. Oh, actually the one that does matter here, the simulating snap counts. Penn State's dealt with that a lot. You see Drew, usually when he's complaining to the officials, it's about the clapping or the simulated snap counts or something like that. So that's something they're trying to snuff out of the game. Will they be able to do that? I don't know. It's been a part of football for the longest time. So I think that's one of those things where guys will find a different way to sort of skirt around that. But I think that's an important one. When you're talking about Penn State, when you're talking about the things that we've seen on film, the things that we've seen get reactions from Penn State players and coaches and all that kind of stuff, I think the snap simulation is a big one.
So let's get into the things that are coming up right now, leading us off with breaking news, essentially, with the rule changes. Now let's get into slightly less breaking news, but still the most timely thing that's happened in the last 24 hours is 3 players officially going into the portal, bringing Penn State's total for the spring up to 5. These ones, I'm not saying that the other ones didn't sting, but you have a little bit more time to plan for a guy like Smith Vilbert, who goes into the portal at the end of February, beginning of March. And now Tamir Robinson, Jon Mitchell, and Beckham D are the latest 3 that go into the portal. We've had extensive coverage at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Wanted to have the conversation here with you guys, though. And Fitz, just tossing it back to you. The name everyone's going to know there is Tamir Robinson, kid from Pennsylvania, been on the roster a while. What's your assessment of the impact of losing these 3 players?
First off, it's funny. You said 5 guys went in, and I was like racking my brain to figure out who the 5th was. But Smith Vilbert, it feels like forever ago,
right?
That he went in the portal in the winter offseason. Of course, JB Nelson there as well for anybody that may have missed that last week, and he's officially in the portal now too. But yeah, Robinson, I think, is the headliner. Jon Mitchell was top 100, top on 300, whatever recruit coming out of Florida. So that one's certainly notable from that measure. But if you were talking about on the field impact this year, Tamir Robinson played some last year, relegated mostly to special teams, but linebacker depth was they rode the wave last year. And I think that they're going to be in line to do that again. They have been kicking the tires, seeing what's out there in the transfer portal. It's a tough sell. Again, you're looking at bringing somebody in that's probably established depth, and that's you almost got to find the right guy that figures that he wants to be a part of a championship team, but may not start. And that's right. Again, a tough sell to somebody in the transfer portal. But Robinson, a surprise when you talk about the grand scheme of things, because he was having a good spring. He was in the mix. He wasn't going to start, but he was in the mix to get in that rotation. I think that's very important because Penn State has played a lot of players. Like you look at, especially in that back 7 in the last couple of years, they've rotated a lot of guys through. So he would have been there for playing time. I'm curious what his next step will be. He's always been a guy that you've looked at as a potential defensive end, potential edge player. I don't think that he would have had the impact moving to edge at Penn State like the guys in his class, or actually the guys probably behind him in his class with or a class behind, with Jalen Harvey, Max Granville, Malachi Williams. But it's just an interesting one because you thought that at worst a core special teamer, at best your third or fourth linebacker. So that is a surprise there. Again,
it's also a situation where I don't think Penn State wants to play. So I was just looking here quickly as you're talking about Tamir Robinson. Last year, Kobe King played 748 snaps, which is third most of anyone on the team behind Zakee Wheatley and Jalen Reed. I don't think that's necessarily what they wanted to do at linebacker, and that Mike position, having a guy that you feel like you can play as a secondary, you're going to have your starter who's going to play all the very important snaps. But if they could find a guy that they could rotate in there, especially early in the season in some conference games, there's an opportunity for snaps with Kobe King gone. I understand the desire to start, but it just feels like that. I agree with you on that side where there was felt like there was a apparent opportunity for somebody to step into that void.
And if you look right now, and if you follow the NBA, you're aware of the substitution patterns of the NBA right now to keep guys fresh for what we're getting into right now, which is the playoffs. So Penn State in college football is looking at a longer season, and you have to adjust you have to adjust your snap counts accordingly. I mean, Zakee Wheatley, I think, is going to lead the team in snaps. Tony Rojas is probably gonna be right there as well. Yeah. But beyond that, you got to flush those guys through. And you're talking about DeLuca, Wiley, Anthony Specca playing in there as well. Maybe some Alex Tash, maybe some of the younger guys. But it's gonna have to be a strategic approach when you're essentially gonna cut some snaps for some guys because of the prize at the end, right? You want to play into the playoffs and go deep into the playoffs. So you look at defensive tackle last year, and they got worn down by the big injury to Alonzo Ford, Hakeem Beamon stepping off, and by the end of the year, you got 3 defensive tackles. Well, there's going to be attrition because that's a position that hurts. That's a position. A position where you guys missed some games. Robinson missed some games last year. Rojas, of course, got the shoulder cleaned up after the season. It's always just one hit away from being not in a great spot. Now, Penn State's in a base 4-2-5 now, like it's a base nickel. So yes, you take one of those linebacker spots out of the equation. You add Dakari Nelson back in because he's out for the spring. But at the same time, you don't feel tremendous about that depth. Spec has come along. Like as I mentioned, Tash is having a very good first spring as well. But you always want more, right? You always want more guys at more spots, and Robinson
and older guys,
and older guys.
A guy that had 3 years of experience on the roster, whether or not it was a situation where he was ascending or, the way I wrote about it yesterday when kind of doing a reset of the room is you never know when the light is going to come on, and it's easier or it's more likely for an older guy to turn that corner to be whatever they're going to be as a final product. Maybe it isn't the superstar or the guy that has all the upside that we thought of Tamir Robinson, but still a good football player that has that institutional understanding. Losing that is an issue. And Ryan, I do want to get your thoughts here on the roster and on the team about these, the impact of these losses as well. So what's your kind of initial takeaway of this first portal surge for Penn State?
Well, Tamir was one of the most, from what people say at least, one of the most improved linebackers this spring so far. So I think that's a major loss. And look, when you have an ACL injury coming out of high school, it takes time. Clearly, I think Tamir wants an opportunity to play more and going to at least look around. We'll see. I think it's a shame, honestly. I really wanted to see Tamir take that step this year. I thought this was an opportunity for him to. And it's just also curious to me because of that lack of depth. Like there was still a good situation here for him to contribute. So I'd like to learn more about the real reasoning behind it. Like Jon Mitchell, for example, I'm pretty confident he's homesick. I felt like we've dug on that a little bit over the last 24 hours. Like I think that's the big part of the reason there. I'm sure he's looking at the depth at cornerback, and I'm sure that played a part as well. But there's been quite a bit of talk about Jon Mitchell being a little homesick. So I get that one. Tamir, I felt like Tamir had an opportunity here. Like right now, Penn State needs 5 linebackers, in my opinion, to kind of get through this season. And I think you could say 2.5 they got right now. I mean, you could throw Speck in there, actually. We'll say 3. I think Speck showed some things last year. That's encouraging. But, Tamir and Wiley were those 2 coming off of injuries that, had opportunities to really gain a lot of snaps, double, triple their snaps. Obviously, Wiley didn't play last year, but Tamir played about 100 or so. And now you're in a situation where Alex Tash and some young guys may have to really kind of step up. We haven't talked about Kari Jackson a ton. Sean, I don't know if you've been able to gather a whole lot on him, but this is Tony Rojas, Dominic DeLuca, obviously going to get the bulk of those snaps. But all you need is one injury, and it's going to be very interesting. I said last year I thought Kobe King was their most important player because they could not lose Kobe King. They lose Kobe King, I don't know that they make it to the Orange Bowl. And I'm not saying he was as impactful as an Abdul Carter or some others, but he was so critically important. And here we are again, not that losing Tamir would change, the fact of how far they can make it or whatever, but you're in a situation where Tony Rojas, one, needs to tackle better and all those kind of things, but they can't afford to lose Tony or Dominic because it really gets
think about that situation last year. They couldn't take Tony off the field all that often because it was him and Dom DeLuca. And, when Tony gets banged up and Dom DeLuca is the only other linebacker, you're really having a conversation about who do you trust to be on the field, him and Kobe King. They just couldn't do that. And so it speaks to the thinness up the middle in Penn State's defense this year, which is something we're monitoring and talking about, but also, the players that they have are good. And so we don't want to overstretch that particular conversation point, but I think it's valid what we bring up here of just losing one more opportunity for a player to step into the void and be a serviceable, good football player, losing that development time. Now we're talking about, you mentioned Alex Tash, a true freshman. And I know I say this all the time on the show. Football is a hard game to learn in one off season, to know really what you need to know in all the situations, to see something for the first time and to adapt to it and have it just in your brain as knowledge. It takes time. And certain guys, they're super athletic and they can make these things work. Middle linebacker, which is, I think, what we're generally talking about here in terms of guys that can command the front, defensive linemen, linebackers, get everybody lined up, have the confidence and the voice to do all of those things and understand what they're looking at. You're just taking another piece out of the Jenga tower for stability at that position. Maybe it's not the most important piece, but it's another piece here.
Yeah. It's worth repeating. You just defined the Mike for Penn State. It's the guy that gets everybody set up. It's not the guy that plays right in the middle, that plays your traditional neck roll middle linebacker stuff. You're going to see, 2 box linebackers that are basically playing in that kind of space. So that makes sense. But I mean, you're going back to sort of the elephant in the room here. Tony got cleaned up after the season. Keon Wiley's coming off of a knee injury. Tash has had the shoulder injury. Kari Jackson missed a bunch of time with injuries. Like there's a lot of guys in there that are one hit away, and that's what makes it tough. So sort of swallow the Robinson thing because, and he's been not that he didn't have his own injury issues, but the more bodies you can throw at it, the more you can make it work. And the next step for that is Tamir was pretty good on special teams last year. Like you look at these young guys that go out there and they cover kicks and they cover punts, and it's a fraction of the game and you don't pay attention to it. You watch who runs down on kickoffs and gets to the line first or whatever. But all that stuff matters in terms of processing the game. And I think that was Tamir's biggest issue is he looked slow out there because he processed slow. And you have growth when you play those special teams, when you get into the speed of the game, when you get into, what those guys are running around at the next level, what they look like and how they move, your reaction to that is it grows. I'm kind of talking myself in a corner here, but he would have seen growth from playing on special teams and continuing to play on special teams. And I think you're going to see that with Specca, with Tash, with Kari Jackson, with LeVar Arrington II, all these guys that need these reps. That's where they're going to get them. And then you can put them into special teams. Keon Wiley's done the same thing. Don DeLuca is a 9-time special teams captain or whatever he is. You've got an opportunity there to continue to grow that room via special teams. And I think that's very important. And I think that that's an underlying issue or an overlooked issue when you talk about cutting the roster is a lot of these guys are going to not miss that opportunity, but maybe not get the opportunity that they thought they would as quickly as they thought they would. And I think that's something to do with Robinson leaving. I mean, he was a stud as a high school recruit, tore up his knee as a junior, did not play as a senior, did not play as a redshirt freshman. And then that's a long, long time. And when you are a guy that has the stars beside his name, that had the demand that he had, because it wasn't just stars, it was schools coming after him pretty hard. You think it's going to happen on a certain timeline. And I don't think that it has happened on a certain timeline that Robinson thought it would. And I think that went into being part of this decision.
It's a really good point for a guy who the potential was always there, and there's always that balance of potential and production. And you can't have a team without potential, and you can't have a team that is only potential. So balancing all of those things. And the good news, I would say, from the guys we've discussed here that are going to be stepping up at this point are probably natural linebackers. Even if they don't have the high-end 33-inch arm, 6'3", walking around at a lean 330 is what you're losing with Tamir Robinson. You got guys that are good linebackers as well. Of course, there's going to be more information. This portal season is not over. And if you want to check it out, we have the transfer portal headquarters at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So instead of having to go to 16 different sites and troll through Instagram and Twitter and trying to find all the information, we're putting our reporting all in one place at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. It's the transfer portal headquarters. So go check that out for the latest information and for the deep, deep information, for the stuff that you need to know that maybe even is too sensitive for the front page. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, subscribing, becoming a member, going on the message board, finding some of those informational nuggets. That's where you get that stuff. So you can sign up for just $1 for the first week to try us out. That'll get you to basically the blue-white game, maybe a couple days before. It'll get you through most of the transfer portal window for just $1. Get that information and be in the know about what's going on with Penn State football recruiting and the transfer portal. Of course, we're doing a giveaway right now where you're running out of time. If you are not subscribed to this show, to this channel, hit the subscribe button. It's absolutely free. It costs you nothing other than half a calorie with your finger to push the button. And you will be automatically entered to win a yearly subscription to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. 5 people, we're picking Blue White Weekend, that are going to win a subscription and be part of the family at BWI for a year. So well worth your free subscription here to the site. Of course, like the video. That's always super helpful for us as well. Another thing we need to tell you about is Andy Ludicky at My Perfect Franchise. He is a sponsor here on the BWI Live Show, longtime sponsor, recruiting fanatic. I don't know how he feels about the transfer portal. I probably think he likes it because he's a Texas fan, but I don't know. We talked about that to start the show. We're going to get into the recruiting here in the second half. You can talk to him about a lot of different stuff if you're a college football fan, which if you're watching this, you absolutely are. But the thing he wants to help you with the most is not understanding that. It's understanding the next phase of your life. He is a franchise consultant expert. He's bought into multiple franchises. He's also started multiple small businesses. So if you want to be a business owner, he can help you through that process, whether it's a small business or his main expertise, which is helping you understand the franchise purchasing process, which, for those that don't know, an existing company, you buy an individual franchise and then you run that as the owner of that particular franchise. You make the money, but you're part of that corporate structure. If that's something that you have expertise in an area or in business management, call him at 404-973-9901. He's a great guy. His services, by the way, are 100% free to you. You don't have to pay him for those things. He will help you through the entire process from beginning to end. And that also includes maybe telling you, hey, this isn't a good fit. You're not financially ready, or maybe there's nothing I can find for you. He's going to tell you all that stuff and be upfront and honest about it. Okay, let's get into visitors coming up this weekend because, as I said, Ryan, to start the show, just taking a look at some of the things that I've seen on your reporting and out there on the internet, feels like this is going to be a pretty good weekend in terms of names that we know, important players that are visiting campus. Safety Joey O'Brien, somebody that everyone's focused on, one of the top players in Pennsylvania, I believe is coming this weekend as well. So is this an effect of being this late into the spring and having the, everyone else being done with spring football and Penn State being one of the only games in town? And how important is that impression this weekend for this particular list of players?
That's certainly part of it. A lot of these guys have gone off and, visited a lot of other schools, especially Southern schools in the last couple of months. Most of the SEC schools started in mid-March. That's Penn State has normally done, but a little bit later this year. Right. Just to clarify also with Easter this weekend, it's more so a Thursday, Friday kind of visit. I think most of these guys will be gone by Saturday morning. There might be a straggler or two, but because it's an Easter weekend, Penn State pushed. Penn State actually has 4 practices next week, and I believe only 2 this week. Tomorrow will be the second one. So most of these guys will be here tomorrow. We'll work on recruit reactions Friday and into Saturday. But it is a pretty solid list, better list than I expected. If you would ask me a couple months ago, as I said. Right now, 13 scholarship guys, and I'm sure there will be a few others. We'll dig on, trying to figure out the names that we're missing later today. I think you have to start with Joey O'Brien, though, without a doubt. One of their top 3, 4, 5 most talked about players, where they're out on the board. I'll let Sean discuss that because I always say they're the top guy, and Sean loves shooting me down. But Joey's absolutely up there. I think we all know that. Look, it's not going to be an easy one. Notre Dame has made a really good impact on him following a visit a few weeks ago. He just went out to Oregon. We'll see how serious he takes, going out to the West Coast long term. But Penn State has some serious work to do. They have an official visit set for May 16th to the 18th, and we'll see if that sticks through. And really, what I'm most curious to see is, does he take all of his official visits? He has a deep schedule, and this is a player who has been traveling for 7-on-7 or unofficial visits nonstop really since March, and it gets very busy. So this is big for multiple reasons. Obviously, he's visited a lot of other schools in recent weeks, so this is Penn State's chance to kind of circle back and remind him why Penn State was in a good position back in the fall. But at the same time, I do believe Penn State has work to do. I don't think they're the favorite at the moment. I do believe Notre Dame has taken that over. So how Penn State is able to rebound from that and show him all the ways that he can be used here at home is massively important. So I'm not sure if Joey has any visits after this, unofficial visit wise. But if he does, stick with his Penn State official visit, there's an opportunity for Penn State to go back to back there as far as visits. But also, if he ends up committing in July, when he takes that Penn State official visit early, you're looking at 2+ months potentially of him not being on campus. So that's something that I'm really keeping an eye on. I think that's really important because I think Penn State just saw the impact of him visiting multiple times in the fall and the rise that they had. But now I think Penn State is also seeing, all these other schools have caught up or have caught them or passed them. And it's because of it's partly because of a long distance between visits. So time will tell where things go, but without a doubt, he's one of the most important guys this weekend.
So Fitz, making a good impression or making a good re-impression. I know generally the coordinators are not the driving force here in recruiting, but I can't help but think, you mentioned Notre Dame being in the lead and the Kyle Hamilton effect, but Caleb Downs is a pretty good football player that everyone knows about. Jim Knowles made him a star at Ohio State last year. So, at least from my perspective, I feel like that could help. I don't know if he's had a chance to meet Jim Knowles or understand the defense, but this defense loves safeties. And so a guy like Joey O'Brien, do you think this weekend is important to kind of reestablish those ideas? Not necessarily the relationship stuff, but here's how we can use you. And here's how you fit into a defense that's going to feature what you do really well.
Yeah, I don't think that you're going to get the connection with Jim Knowles through a phone call. Like, I think it's going to be one of those things that you put in front of, if you put Jim Knowles in front of him, okay, that's going to have some staying power. But if you rely on him, doing it from a distance, I think that's going to be a tougher sell. Now, O'Brien's coming back. Ryan, I tried to throw you off in the middle of your conversation by retweeting a Chad Simmons article that just went live about his Oregon visit and how much he liked Oregon. But no, because Oregon, I think, has vaulted into the mix here as well. But yeah, I mean, that's got to be the pitch, right? I mean, even if it wasn't Caleb Downs and Jim Knowles, like, you got to be a centerpiece as a safety in whatever defense Penn State's going to run. You're coming off of a draft, or you're going into a draft in which you should have 2 guys drafted, and then Zakee Wheatley's got some buzz nationally going into next year. So safety is, you're riding sort of that high water mark right there, and you've got to cash in on it. O'Brien, nothing has changed in terms of how important he is to Penn State. He was number 1 on my big board in February. He remains up there just in general because he is such an important prospect, a great player, an in-state player, and a guy that Penn State's put a lot of time and effort into recruiting, and they're going to continue to do so. But yeah, I think that bringing him in, once he gets comfortable with Jim Knowles' style, like, that is an appealing opportunity for him. I don't want to speak for Joey, but that's an opportunity for him to come in, play decently early. If you look at how safety is set up, and really, sort of take the next step as one of those. You mentioned Kyle Hamilton, one of those prospects, and Penn State's had some really, really good safeties. They haven't quite fit that mold, the 6'4", eventually 210-pound safeties that can cover a lot of ground. I think Joey O'Brien can be that. So
yeah,
yes, you continue to push that, and then you sort of add the Jim Knowles aspect of it. I think it's still an appealing pitch. He's still very interested in Penn State. He's going to be here, I think, 2 days this week, and then come back for an official visit. I'll be fascinated to see how that official visit schedule continues to develop. Ryan, we've talked about this on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. It's that O'Brien has a bunch of visits set. He narrowed his list to 6. Does he take visits to all those 6 schools? I don't know. It gets monotonous at this point. Like, it gets kind of old.
Can I just jump in for the crowd that's not watching, for our podcast crowd, and put this up here? So this is what they're talking about in terms of the official visit schedule, which you can check out at On3. May 16th, he's going to Penn State. May 30th, he's going to Clemson. Then June 3rd, Notre Dame. June 6th, Oregon. June 13th, Tennessee. June 20th, Ohio State. That is a massive list. Penn State is the closest, 150 miles away. The farthest away is 2,400 miles away to Oregon. So it is, as Fitz just said, an absolute grind here of the amount of visits that he's going to take if he takes all 6 of these as well. So Fitz, I just wanted to give that for our podcast audience. Please continue.
It's also worth noting that Ohio State visit, Ohio State was not in his top 6 that he released this week. So
yeah.
Or last week, I guess it was. So that's Michigan worked their way in there. So we're going to see what happens with those schools. So I could see that list shuffling a little bit. It's interesting to watch because we talked about this back when these guys were setting all these visits up, and guys are, they want to be the first. They want to basically, we talk about saving spots in recruiting classes. You're saving spots in the calendar right now for guys. And we saw that with Kari Adams this week, a very, very, like O'Brien, a very, very important target for Penn State, a regional guy that's gone national and I believe is number 30 overall and on three's rankings right now. He's not going to officially visit USC. That was a midweek visit that he had planned in June. I think a lot of it's coming together, and a lot of it's just like, man, do I really want to be on the road for 5 or 6 straight weeks? Or do I want to have a summer, or do I want to, kind of really, really, really get into the meat of my recruitment? And I think the sweet spot is probably 3 to 4. Like, I think that's the ideal thing because when you go on 5 and 6 visits, you got too much coming at you. And that's, I think we're starting to see some guys whittle it down. Kari, by the way, I talked to him this week. He's going to be at Penn State again soon. So definitely check that out. And he's got an official visit set up for June as well. So it's very important. Like, those 2 guys are very, very important. We talk about all the depth and talent at defensive end, on the defensive line in the region. But when you talk about skill players on defense, those 2 stand out to me above everyone else.
Yeah, when we get to these players that as we've talked about here, that kind of shoot into the national conversation. It becomes a different conversation about recruiting and success level for Penn State. And again, just to give you the breakdown here on Kari Adams, he's going to Auburn, South Carolina, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Oregon. That was the list before cutting USC. And it is interesting. At a certain point, you're taking the visit just because you want the attention. It seems like, if you were to go through 7 or 8 visits, you probably, especially for a guy like Kari Adams, who I'm looking at his visit schedule, has been to a lot of places. He's been in Maryland, South Carolina, Rutgers, North Carolina, Notre Dame, Syracuse, Pitt. Like the visits, as Ryan has said previously, the visits really tell you the story about like how these things have gone down. And a guy like Kari Adams, you look at just put this back up here on the visually for the YouTube audience. Look at the number of schools, the number of visits he's made. If you haven't made your mind up by the time you get to your officials, you narrowed it down to the top 3 or maybe 4, as you guys talked about. Seems like that is there's something else going on there in terms of what you're doing.
I don't know. I think it's just one of those things. So we've all planned vacations where we tried to cram way too much into our vacation. Like it looks great on paper at some point, and then you get there and you're in the middle of it and you're like, this is a lot, So
that's me with the show rundown.
Yeah, exactly like that. You know what? That's very relevant here as well. So no, I think you look at this and it sounds great, and you get to see all these wonderful places and all these people kiss your ass. It's great. You get fed like all weekend. Your parents love it. You basically, it's basically a party every weekend, and some guys have added midweek to that. It can be very fun, but it also, when you talk about the grand scheme of things of picking a school, a lot of that stuff is extracurricular, if you will. Like it doesn't factor into what you're going to be eventually deciding on.
Ryan,
especially here in the last 2 years, a couple of things have changed that I think has really impacted guys. One, January is a full contact period for these juniors, right? So they get bombarded, and I mean bombarded with college coaches coming at them, to schools, in-home visits, everything, for about a 3-week stretch, right? And that's a good experience because a lot of guys are gathering other offers. For example, Kari Adams, I mean, his offer list like doubled. It was like 10 to 15 offers or something like that in January. So that makes a lot of sense. It's a good period. They learn a lot. And they set all those visits up in February. That's gotten really sped up over recent years, especially this year that took off. Well, now it's, again, a contact period, April 15th. It runs through the end of May, and they're going to get bombarded with coaches again. These kids were always taking those March and April visits, but they didn't have quite the contact period that they have in May and the contact period that they have in January. And they had a little bit of a gap there. Obviously February is a dead period. But my point with all that is the amount of contact, the amount of visits, the amount of everything that has come into January through February, I think is draining a lot of these guys out quicker than what we saw maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Now, don't get me wrong, guys will always get tired of the process at some point, but I'm just seeing that and hearing that a lot more from players and even parents. Like Peyton Falzone's dad, I just did an interview with. I mean, that was a big part they wanted Penn State offer as true quarterback too. That was the biggest thing, but they were getting pretty wiped out from the process. So all that to say, these guys in February, they set all these up, because they haven't been quite worn out yet. Well, now Kari Adams has visited 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 schools. It'll be 8, I believe, by the time it's all said and done in March and April, and then all these coaches are going to come to a school in May. Like these guys are going to start narrowing this stuff down because they just get wiped out.
What about Keyshawn Stansel? Let's move on. Let's talk about a different prospect here. Somebody that I know when we talk about, I can feel the buzz in terms of like the quality of the prospect. And I'm not saying where on the board, but it seems like a guy that's, an interesting prospect to discuss. So I know he's going to be coming up this weekend. Ryan, let's go back to you. What do you know about this particular situation?
I mean, certainly one of Deion Barnes' most important interior guys. We've seen Garrett Witherington kind of move up that board here in recent weeks, and we've talked about Damari Simeon and a few others, but Stansel camped at Penn State, so that they have a really good feel as far as what he brings athletically, and him camping there last year gave them an opportunity to get a foot in the door earlier than most. He already had a handful of quality P4 offers at the time, but that I think really helped Penn State get him back on campus then for a game this year, and obviously this upcoming visit and an official visit as well. At the same time, he's blown up to the point where he's got some really good quality schools after him. I think Georgia, especially being one of the more recent ones, seemed to really have his interest. Miami and Tennessee, we know they're both aggressive NIL wise as well. So to me, I don't know how much Stansel. I don't know how much Stansel is going to prioritize financials and all that stuff. All these guys are. Let's not pretend that financials aren't top 3 for the vast majority of these guys now. That's just the case. And when I look at some of these Southern schools, I know they're going to be very aggressive. I think Penn State has an opportunity and has done enough, production wise to really be one of those schools that intrigues him. I'm just curious to see if there's a bidding war here long term, because Stansel's growth and the information that's out to him as far as what he brings athletically, I think it could spark a bidding war. So that's just me thinking out loud. I don't really know 100% as far as what he's prioritizing or people.
But you see
that.
the conditions for around it. A guy who has interest from the South, looking at where he's visiting and the quality of the player.
Yeah, and he's not like he's a Maryland guy or a New Jersey guy. I mean, he is North Carolina, so it's not like Penn State's backdoor, that he has connections to Penn State or anything like that. But without a doubt, I mean, he's one of the more athletic defensive tackles on the East Coast or really within the region, however you want to look at it, and that makes him incredibly important. And a guy that Deion Barnes has a great relationship with. I just wonder long term, is that relationship going to be what wins out? Maybe 5-6 years ago that would have been the case, but I think when you bring financials and some other things into this, I'm just very curious to see where this goes, because people know how good of an athlete Keyshawn Stansel is now, and at a premium position like that. Not that Penn State won't be aggressive; they will, but I just wonder. We saw Tennessee, right? And how aggressive they can be and things like that. And
Georgia, Miami, Tennessee, that is a murderer's row of NIL conversation. And then you got Miami NC State and Penn State in there, right?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, NC State's that's a local school. I mean, I believe Clayton's right outside of Raleigh, so that's a big part there. But we'll see. I mean, Penn State's absolutely top 4. I could see him being fringe top 3-ish, but it's not going to be an easy recruitment for them to win.
By the way, I meant to mention this yesterday, didn't get to it here on the show, but for the podcast audience, first off, for the regulars that are always here, I always appreciate you guys listening to the show. Most consistent group of people I've ever met. If you would help us out, we'd like to grow that side and have our podcast grow a little bit on that side. We focus a lot because we're here live on the YouTube show on that stuff. But if you want to get in on the BWI mailbag, which happens every week, usually on on Tuesday or Wednesday, drop a rating on Apple Podcasts with a 5-star review and your question. I mean, I say a 5-star review because that's what we prefer. But if you think it's a 4-star, I don't want to lead the witness.
Only taking questions from 5-star reviews. Sorry.
4 stars, you're out. We're kicking you out.
I chose the wrong time to try to be humble. But yeah, 5 stars plus your question. We'll get that on the mailbag. We're going to try and help you be a part of the show a little bit more in the future. So if you would do that, if only just to help us out, you're a regular, and it's just scroll to the bottom. If you don't know how to do it, you click on our thing, you scroll to the bottom. That's where the comment section is. That's where the review section is. Appreciate you guys. Now that I shoehorn that in there, I know Peter Bork is also a guy that's coming up this weekend. Quarterback, massive conversation. We're going to be ending the show talking more about quarterbacks, but Ryan, Peter Bork is a name we've been talking about quite a bit for 2027.
This is Sean's guy. This is all Sean's guy. He loves himself some Peter Bork.
It's not all Sean's guys. Just haven't discovered the kid. I mean, no, I'm kidding. He was. I've been very impressed by him, not just with his arm, not just with his athleticism, but his approach to everything. I think he's done a really good job, and I think he really fits. We talk about Penn State kids. He really fits what Penn State wants to do, and I think Penn State's in a good spot for him early. I think there's a lot of schools that are, making him a priority. Florida just offered. I know Michigan's in there. Notre Dame. You've got sort of the cream of the crop coming after him. I think he's the number 2 quarterback nationally by On 3 now. It's sort of crept up on us because he was a guy that I don't want to call him. I don't want to say it was regional, but he didn't get out a ton of places. He's playing lacrosse. He's doing all this kind of other stuff, and kind of snuck up on us. So number 49 nationally by the industry, number 49 nationally by us. That's a pretty good quarterback to have one of those guys. Not in your backyard, but Massachusetts is not too far. They've got a great relationship there at Tabor Academy with Jeff Moore as coach, and they've recruited some 2026 teammates. So they're going to make it a regular stop when they get out and about and go out and onto the road. So I think Bork, you hate to get too early because on quarterback reporting, because you've got guys that come and go, which is really interesting. If you take a look at 2026, the guy that we were focused in on probably a year and a half ago, visited a ton from Ashland, Ohio, Nathan Bernard. He came to Penn State a bunch, and Penn State kind of drifted the other direction. Now all of a sudden, Michigan is offered, and he's probably going to end up at Michigan. So you can never tell with quarterback recruiting, but I feel pretty good about Peter Bork after seeing him in person a few times. I think he's going to have some staying power in the 2027 rankings. Again, great arm, athletic kid, and I think Penn State has done a really good job recruiting him. To get him back on campus this weekend is huge. Was hoping to see him at the Elite 11 in May. That's not going to happen due to his lacrosse schedule, but I can see Penn State getting him back to throw with Danny O'Brien and Trace McSorley this summer at camp.
So I just want something that we've had the conversation about Troy Hune, right, of a guy that was a top 10 quarterback, and then fans are wondering what's going on with Troy Hune. Is Penn State blah, 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 because he has kind of regressed a little bit. Peter Bork was 6'4" last year. He's been tall his whole career. So when you have those measurables, the arm strength and all those things early, you get noticed early. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to backslide as a quarterback in the class of 2027, but this is what Fitz is talking about when we say it's early. Other guys are going to grow tall, and their arms are going to get stronger, and there will be more competition that will meet him at his level of physicality and ability. So it's just I just want to prime the conversation around, I think he's got staying power to be a top 5 quarterback, but we'll see how it all plays out because, I think Troy Hune also has staying power to be a top 5 quarterback. His offense and the production all plays into these things. So those are the same conversations and the same alchemy that could happen as we get into 2027 and with Peter Bork. So just my disclaimer.
One thing with Peter Bork too, it's important to keep in mind is I believe he was a reclass. A lot of those New England guys are a reclassification. He's one of the oldest guys in the class, and this is something I probably should have written up by now. I remember talking to Charles Power about this when the on 300 drop for 2027. But he's absolutely one of the older guys in this class. Not saying that will give him a reason to backslide or anything like that. But I think it's important to note that that's part of the reason why I think he's as highly rated as he is at the moment. Just from a development perspective, he is about a year older than quite a few of these guys. Maybe not quite a year, but like a good 10 months or so. He's going to graduate, I think, as like a 19-year-old or something like that. So it's just something to keep in mind with Bork.
Any other names, Fitz? Do you have any more on Peter Bork, or any
He's
other
18
names
this
coming
summer.
This weekend?
He's 18 this summer. Just looked it up.
All right. Well, I mean, not so much about the age here, but you're talking about Troy Hune. You think Diabell, Troy Hune, Brady Hart, all those dominoes that fell in the 2026 class early fell in late May, early June, something like that. So could see that happen in 2027 as well. You've got the number 1 quarterback in the country committed to Ohio State, and some of those top guys want to sort of be a year ahead of everything else. Now you're still seeing Penn State just picked up a 2026 quarterback in Peyton Falzone, and Michigan's still going after Bernard and all these guys. There's a bunch of 2026 guys still out there, but I think you've kind of seen the blueprint of how this 2027 group is going to come through. It's probably going to be early once again.
Let's round into the final 10-ish minutes of the show, 15 minutes of the show, talk about Ryan's conversations he had this week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com with a bunch of recruits, reviewing players that have visited and their experience. And, of course, let's start, before we get into the players, with the adults in the room, Brad Mendler and Tom Falzone, I believe it is. You talked to Peyton Falzone's dad. So those conversations surrounding Penn State's latest quarterback, Fitz and I have discussed him over the last week. What are your conversations around those people that have, big influence on Falzone? How did those conversations go? And what were your big takeaways?
Big takeaway is this is a guy who really wanted to be a quarterback. And I think we already knew that, but the amount of commitment that he has shown to be a Division I quarterback is impressive. I mean, we're talking about 10 trips from Nazareth, PA to outside of Cleveland, and even west of Cleveland. It's a little bit west and south of Cleveland. That's where Brad Mandler's, home base is kind of located at. So, this is what, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours round trip. I mean, it is not for the faint of heart to consistently do that 9, 10 times. And we're talking about a 3-month span. He really started, I think he went out there once at the end of December. That's when it kickstarted. But really, since the beginning of January, he's been consistently making those trips. So that stands out a lot to me. Brad was open about the fact that he's the most athletic quarterback that he's been able to work with so far, and was also open about the fact that a lot of schools talked to Brad about improving Peyton's release. Peyton wasn't a quarterback growing up. His dad has talked about that in multiple interviews now, and that he really just kind of became Nazareth's quarterback out of necessity. They needed They just needed one, right? And he was the most athletic guy on the team, and here we are. So, when we look at release and all these different things and that we, put under a microscope for so many guys, this is a guy who's really only played one full season at quarterback. He played a little bit as a freshman, and now obviously coming into junior year. So,
yeah,
or excuse me, no, he just finished his junior year. Apologize, but so 2 full seasons of it. But the commitment to get better and the commitment to prove that he's a full-time quarterback really stands out to me, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. So I'm really curious to see how he keeps progressing and how that impacts the way Charles Power and others look at him. I'm not worried really at all when it comes to him going somewhere, because this is the absolute offer that he wanted. He wanted to be a Penn State quarterback, period, end of story. So I'm not too concerned about other schools knocking on the door and trying to poach him. I haven't spoken with Troy Hune. Sean, I don't know if you have, but curious to see how that looks. But Troy's always been pretty good recruiter, good team guy. I don't think it would have a big impact on him, but it is something that I do want to learn more about. And he's way out in California, so it's a little hard to do that at times, but we'll keep an eye on that. But I think Penn State's really excited about the athlete that they're getting here, and the progress that he's shown in 3 months of working with Brad has them pretty excited. So let's see where things go.
Yeah, Fitz, first off, you're muted. Did you have a follow-up to any of those things?
Not really. No, I mean, I think it's one of those ones where the math makes sense in terms of taking 2. We talked about the roster build and the era that we're in with that position. It makes a ton of sense to have 2 guys on the roster. And I sort of said my piece on Tuesday about his ceiling as a quarterback, his ceiling as an athlete, and how that's going to come together. I don't know, because it's going to be on him to work his way into that position and see what he can do. Like I said, it's a sky high ceiling. But for the second cycle in a row, you've got a guy with a sky high ceiling. It's got a long way to get there.
So I apologize. I did have something I was thinking about this week, and I wanted to ask you as a follow up. The thing that surrounded me in this conversation, and I think where I kind of pivoted pretty quickly on Peyton Falzone.
You forgot to say I don't want to put you on the spot, by the way. Thanks.
Sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot, but here's what I've been thinking about. We talk about quarterbacks that let me just start. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, a guy that had a bad release, sorry, you're not a quarterback anymore. You get to the NFL draft and a guy has bad mechanics, and it's a death sentence for him to be a quarterback at the next level. There's no fixing it. But in the last 10 years, throwing science has gotten so much better. And we talk about the most obvious of the conversations. We don't talk enough, I think, about the process that Jalen Hurts went through. It was a little bit underrated, but obviously Josh Allen going through changing his throwing motion in the NFL. Guys like Drew Aller and Peyton Falzone are doing it at the high school level, where your brain is just more elastic when you're younger. The ability to reprogram some of these things that you've done your whole life isn't that long at that point. So you have the better opportunity. We have more information. There are more people like Quincy Avery and Brad Mendler and quarterback coaches out there that understand the mechanics and the science of throwing. And so fixing mechanics to me is not as big of a deal as I think it was when I first started getting interested in something like that. And so when we talk about these high upside prospects, is there even, I don't say even more incentive, but is Penn State more willing to take a guy like Peyton Falzone now, as opposed to maybe when James Franklin first started at Penn State, because of this evolution in the process of quarterback development? Or is all of that immaterial?
I think a lot of it has to do with Mandler. I think they trust Mandler. They've seen it now with 2+ quarterbacks.
And it's not necessarily, is Brad going to fix him? It's, does he have the capability to do what we want him to do in the long run? And I think that it's not a situation where that's going to get addressed and all of a sudden, it's been interesting to watch the comments, because Brad just started working with him, and that, if you look at his junior film, like that has nothing to do with what he's done since then. So number one, the onus has been on the kid to improve, and it looks like he's trying to do that. So that's good. T. Frank, what I'm going to say here is, going back to your comments, is you said you couldn't get by with a bad release. And I'm going to broaden that to say mechanics, because I think the release is very important, because what you're trying to do when you fix mechanics, and we'll do air quotes there, fix mechanics, is to come out with the best release possible, the most efficient release possible, because you've got an opportunity to have an athlete at quarterback that can throw. And that's nothing new for what James Franklin has done. They took Michael Johnson Jr., who was not a thrower,
exactly. Yes.
But it's athletic upside, because the athletic upside can do so much for you in the quarterback run game. It can do so much for you in just like varying your offense, because you take a look at what Penn State has right now. And Drew, to his credit, has done a wonderful job becoming more agile, running the football, deciding to run the football, and being efficient when he runs the football. I mean, this is not a guy that just runs into 4-yard losses. He picks up first downs. Sometimes he takes more hits than he probably should, but you've got a guy that has adopted to that, instead of being rigid and finding that offense to be a drop back passer offense. Now, on the flip side of that, in a drop back passer offense, you put more of that impetus on your receivers to get open. And I think that that's kind of what we've seen when they do go into that normal sort of like that normal
traditional
traditional passing game. And Penn State has not had the receivers to get open because of it. So when you are athletic, when this is the Drew versus Bo talk all over again. When you have an athletic guy that has a running threat at quarterback, your corners have to peek into the backfield. Your safeties have to peek into the backfield, have to do all that kind of stuff. And it might give you the space that you need to develop a little bit more separation with your wide receivers. So I think that is the give and take when you're talking about a guy like Falzone, who doesn't, he's got a monster cannon of an arm, but and that doesn't matter to me. Like that does not matter how far he can throw the football. He can be a hell of a javelin thrower. It'd be great. But it's about the efficient release and making it work, throwing on the run, making the right decisions, and processing. I kind of started off our conversation on Tuesday by saying that the mechanics stuff is a red herring. That's not really what we're looking for in the improvement of him playing quarterback. It's the processing. It is the playmaking ability. And you get a bunch of that with the athletic base that he's got, and it can open up your offense. And I think that that's really what opens up Penn State to taking him as a quarterback. Now, then there's the other stuff. 11-inch hands, as what did Brad say to you? They can throw a heck of a spiral. You know what else they can do? They can catch the football. So there is so much that he can do on a football field that he doesn't even know that he can do on a football field yet. That is the upside right there with Peyton Falzone.
So Rob says here in the chat, he says touch and accuracy is more important than arm motion. Ultimately, that's where we're going, Rob. But you got to understand the process has to start with, can you physically complete the task we're asking you to do if you're a quarterback? And if your arm motion is like what it was for Peyton Falzone or any of these athletic quarterbacks, the building blocks of being a good football player, that you can't have a bad throwing motion. There was a quarterback in the class of 2025 or 26, I forget, Stone Saunders, I believe. And I watched his throwing motion. It's too long. It allows the cornerbacks and the safeties to key in visually on when the ball is coming out and to then intercept the football. It takes too long. If you want to love the fact that football is a game of inches and you want to glorify that, and then you discredit where the inches, millimeters, and seconds are all one, that is incongruent. So it absolutely does matter. But ultimately, you are correct. Touch and accuracy, decision-making, these are the things that make a great quarterback. But, that's the part of the conversation we're getting to after, hey, this is a viable quarterback with impressive upside. And so the more options you have there, and this is what I'm driving at, the more options you have of viable, high upside quarterbacks that you can work with to make a passer and not just an athlete that can throw, that's only good for football and for Penn State. And so I know I've gotten us way off the rails here. I just find this particular conversation, I think these are the things I'm thinking about of the deeper level of, how football is evolving and how all these things are creating different scenarios than we've been used to for 20 years.
And he's also a high school junior. Like that's the thing to look at. As you mentioned with the brain elasticity, that's probably a bit deep. He's got a lot to learn, and he has the capacity to learn it. So that's the encouraging part there. And again, athletic upside can get you pretty far when you talk about what you can do as an offensive play, as an offensive weapon.
I love quarterbacks. Ryan.
You started the pre-show, by the way, with "I'm sick and I'm not going to talk much today," and that's That's definitely like we lured you out of your cage, and that's where you're at right now. So,
Ryan, the other conversations you had this week with prospects. Let's finish the show strong with some guys and some highlights here. Who's interesting in terms of recapping guys you spoke with this week?
Lots. Jackson Ford just back on campus, encouraging there. To me, this is Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. Feels like it's going to be a Big Ten battle there. He has a few other visits set as well for June, but it does feel like it's pointing in that direction. I don't want to rule any other schools out, but I'd be surprised if it's not. And I'll even add, I mean, it feels like Michigan, Penn State more than Ohio State, but Ohio State offered late. He's only visited once, and does look like the Buckeyes are going to get an official visit. So that's, you certainly can't rule them out. But I think Penn State's going to have a bit of a battle there, but I also feel like they have a very good shot. I just don't think it's a lock or anything like that with him. Grayson McHugh, definitely want to mention him. Joey O'Brien's teammate at LaSalle, just back at campus, only his second visit, which kind of surprised me a little bit. I'm surprised he didn't get to maybe more games, but LaSalle plays a lot on Saturdays and stuff, so it's not a total shocker. And Grayson still hasn't visited a ton of schools. He's slowly starting to get more visit set and official visit plans and all that. But I think the big thing is he's going out to Notre Dame this weekend, and it's going to really tell us a lot about where Penn State stacks up, where Notre Dame stacks up. Does this shape up to be a Penn State Notre Dame battle? Wouldn't shock me if that's the case, but he also continues to stack up some really good offers. I wouldn't be shocked at all if a few more schools come into the mix, but right now I do believe it's still Penn State and Duke as far as OVs are concerned with Grayson. And then I wouldn't be shocked at all if Notre Dame's eventually in there as well. So keep an eye on him. Penn State welcome back Daryl Carey, the Matha safety 2026 prospect this past weekend. The thing with Carey is that, like, man, he just isn't really visiting a lot of schools. And so on one hand, that's good for Penn State. On the other hand, I just feel like is he just kind of pigeonholing himself a little bit into making a decision that's maybe not as broad as a lot of other guys handle it. At the same time, I don't know, his top schools are like Oregon. I don't really think Oregon's very much in the mix. Texas A&M, South Carolina, how hard are some of those schools pursuing him? I'm not exactly sure. I will say that I do confidently believe that he's a player Penn State really wants. Sean, you and I have both heard that multiple occasions over multiple months now, and I still believe that's the case. At the same time, like, he last visited Penn State in the fall and then hasn't visited anywhere since until coming back to Penn State. He hasn't even been to Maryland. I like doubled and triple checked on that one. Nothing over the last couple of months. So I think Penn State's in a good spot there. I'm just curious on, what's keeping him from going to visit other schools, or how's his recruitment really look? Because it's just kind of a little bit of a strange one and not what you expect for a player that Penn State feels really good about. Kind of where he's at in that whole process. So last other guy too, got to mention Maxwell Hiller, right? One of the most important 2027 prospects for Penn State, or at least it's certainly shaping up to be that way. I think the big thing with him, he's been on campus a ton of times now, hasn't really seen a practice before, which that's all good. I think the main thing though is that, like, he purposely set this visit up to be here when Leighton Von Brandt was here. And those guys have developed a really good relationship, and, that relationship continues to grow. The fact that these guys are scheduling visits together, I think, is really encouraging for Penn State. Obviously, he's going to have some great schools, and that's going to drag out for a long period of time. He's a 2027 prospect, if I didn't make that clear. But, for the most part, this is a recruitment Penn State should have a good opportunity with. And that relationship with Von Brandt, I think, is really going to help them long term.
It just fits the number of tackles that we're talking about, like high quality tackles with great film, great athleticism, great size. It's amazing what Phil Trautwein has done. I didn't think I
mentioned Jack Fuchs. Yeah,
a 6'8" dude who can move too. Like, it feels like we're in an alternate universe from where we were 5 years ago.
Yeah,
so it happens when you develop first round picks.
Yeah, that makes a difference, doesn't it? And stability and things of that nature. Also, Jimmy Cal is going to visit tomorrow, so like there's more names coming along the way. And I'll be honest with you, Maxwell Hiller, I think, is at his best a guard. He reminds me a lot of Cooper Cousins. So it's there's like, again, you used to recruit guards to play tackle because you had to. Now you're recruiting tackles to play everywhere, which I think is a really good strategy. So yeah, the stability, and I wrote about it last week after JB, hit the portal. I mean, it just hasn't happened all that much. So when someone like that hits the portal, it's all of a sudden big news, because you've got an opportunity to, or not an opportunity, but you've got a situation where not many guys have moved on. Whereas, James talked about Alex Burkmeyer this week. Like, there's guys that have been around a decent amount of time, whereas Tamir Robinson's hitting the portal. Burkmeyer in that same class is content with where I don't want to say content with where he's at, but he continues to be on his developmental track.
Yeah.
And that is kind of the story of the offensive line room. And that has helped kind of everything. And when Phil's there and when all those guys are coming together, that makes a big difference. So I'm encouraged, continue to be encouraged by the job that they've done over the last 5 years. And then when you flesh it out to the last 10 years, it's almost unbelievable. Like, it's we're a long way from, no disrespect to Brian Guy and Derek Dowry, a long way from those moves to shore up an offensive line with defensive linemen.
Ryan's going to be on the case, getting more feedback and conversation with recruits and with insiders this weekend at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But Fitz, the conversation here on the show is ending. That doesn't mean the conversation with us is over. Tell people about the Friday chat that's going on today.
The Friday chat started on a Thursday. Well, it's Good Friday tomorrow, so we all wanted to get ahead of that, and I haven't gotten any questions yet, but I see there are a bunch. They have been very popular, and really that's kind of where the juice has been. T. Frank mentioned earlier with the portal stuff, you can't put everything in an article, and you certainly can't put everything out there on social media. So definitely check out that chat. It has become a popular feature. It's been a popular feature, but it's been one of those things that, it's where to go for all the latest Penn State information, just like BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. And I encourage you guys to check it out. I've seen a bunch of my replies and I see who's subscribed and who is not. And there's a difference there. So definitely check us out, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com.
For Ryan Snyder and Sean Fitz, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for joining us on the show, and thanks to everybody listening on podcast land. Once again, if you want to get in on the mailbag, or if you want to leave comments, questions, concerns, you want to just generally tell me that I'm terrible at this, leave a 5-star review when you're doing it. And that way we'll be able to grow the show, and you can find like-minded people that way as well in the comments. So we'll talk to you next week. It's Blue-White Week next week. We'll be previewing what's coming up for the game and all that stuff here on the BWI Live Show starting on Tuesday. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Sean Fitz, Ryan Snyder. We'll talk to you later.